history teacher. He's a lover of reading, especially books written by the church fathers and about the early church. And Cherise is about to begin studying to become an early childhood teacher. She enjoys spending time with children and using her creativity, especially when baking. Both of them are 22 years old and come from a Baptist background. They were confirmed and entered into full communion with the church on the 6th of January of this year and got married in the church 6 days later. So can we give a warm round of applause for Reuven and Cherise Korff.
Thank you for your introduction. So, as was said, my name is Reuven Korff, and this is my lovely wife, Cherise. We have both been asked today to share our story with you on our coming to the Catholic faith. Now, it is hardly a conversion story to rival St. Paul's or even Scott Hahn's. Whatever the case, it is our little prayer that you might get some good from it.
Our testimony... Our testimony is unique in that we received 4 sacraments in 1 week. Oops, I'll change the slide as well. We are very new at this. Let's give that a go. Our testimony is unique in that we received 4 sacraments in 1 week. In January this year, we had our first confession on the 5th, we got confirmed and had our first communion on the 6th, and we got married on the 12th, so it was an incredibly meaningful time for us. We plan to share with you how we came to this point and share a message that we hope will be helpful. Thank you. It's best for us to start from the very beginning.
I, myself, was raised in a Baptist family. All good? Oh, brilliant. And attended Titirangi Baptist Church throughout my upbringing. I always found my congregation a place of good company and community. I was very happy as a Baptist and did not feel as though my beliefs were insufficient or lacking in any way. This is one of the many reasons why my conversion makes no sense without the active grace of God.
Both of my parents are Christians, but our family circumstances weren't ideal for raising children up in faith. My parents divorced when I was about 7 years old, so growing up I lived with my mum and 3 siblings. Christianity wasn't something that we actively engaged in together, and if I wanted to attend church, it would need to be on my own initiation. This being said, I've always considered myself a Christian. Our relationship began when I was 17, and Reuven had just turned 18. While most Christian women are looking for God-honoring men to spend the rest of their lives with, around this time, my number one hope for my future husband was that he would be funny. This is a good quality to hope for, though it probably shouldn't have been at the top of the list. In getting together with Reuven, I didn't realize how blessed I would be. I often think about how fortunate I am to have him as the spiritual leader in our family of 2. I could have ended up with anyone, but God put Reuven in my life, and I am so thankful. Not long after our relationship began, Reuven invited me along to his family's home church, which we attended for years.
Neither of us ever thought very much about the Catholic faith. As I'm sure is common for many young Protestants, we had inherited a pattern of assumptions about Catholics, such as that they worshipped statues or Our Lady. Furthermore, we knew few Catholics and never ever spoke to them about faith. So how did we come to be where we are? To explain this, I will need to tell my side of the story first. At university in early 2016, I met a good friend in French Genève named Shanna. I discovered early on, spying a rosary bracelet that she wore, that she was Catholic. I'm frankly not sure why this became a point of interest to me. Perhaps I was just happy to find another faithful Christian of any stripe amidst the secular humanism of Auckland University. I got into the habit of asking her questions about her faith and the differences between our 2 traditions. Funnily enough, I found none of her reasoning for the Catholic faith convincing, at least in the sense that I didn't see any reason why on my shelves would believe it. But something about our conversations convinced me that at least there was reasoning behind the faith, and did not allow me to think of Catholics anymore as fools who couldn't tell a Bible from a leather-bound dictionary. Perhaps I could not say exactly why Catholics believed what they did, but I realized that they had thought long and hard on it. I could see now this was an essential step in my formation. To jump forward about a year, I'd finally given in and gotten a smartphone. I began to use this to listen to podcasts and audio lectures during my long commutes from my home in Titirangi to Auckland University, a very long way. In particular, I was interested in learning about theology. Through an odd kind of telephone tree of podcasts, certain speakers recommending or referring to other speakers, I came to Catholic apologists such as Patrick Coffin and Scott Hahn. I simply found it hard to find any other podcast on Christianity which I could truly sink my teeth into. Now, in October 2017, I bought a ring for my then-girlfriend, Cherise, and planned to propose the day after my final exam. Saturday, the 18th of November it was. Sometime during this last week, I remember walking up and down on the university library stairs, listening to podcasts in the downtime between study. That was how I relaxed, you see. I remember I was listening on a whim to a lecture simply titled The Eucharist by former evangelical Steve Ray. C.S. Lewis himself once wrote that a young man who wishes to remain a sound atheist cannot be too careful of his reading. The same certainly applies to those wishing to remain Protestant, though for me, of course, it was listening more than reading. By the end of Ray's talk, I remember having two thoughts. One, that I really had no criticisms for any of the man's arguments. Two, that I needed to become Catholic. The stranger part was that the Eucharist wasn't even a topic I cared about. Even so, I felt our Lord tugging deep in my breast, and I wasn't so much of a fool as to refuse him. Needless to say, I wasn't very interested in my exams at that point. So I spent my university holidays then on a strange kind of frenzy, trying desperately, and perhaps somewhat impatiently, to understand where I was and where I was being pulled. For the former, I feverishly read page after page of the writings of Martin Luther and spent 5 or 6 hours, not all at a time, but over a certain amount of time, I'm speaking with my pastor, asking him bluntly why I should not become Catholic. For the... I also spoke with some Catholics that I knew about my experiences, but not knowing that many, I resorted on the whole to my old classics of reading and listening to dozens of hours worth of podcasts. Fortunately, none of my doubts stood very long when faced with the simple but fathomless truths of the Catholic faith. I knocked and the door was opened. As if I was some kind of pioneer, I discovered among many things the Church Fathers, the liturgy, and devotion to Our Lady. How can I explain the realization that I was a foreigner to my own history? Or how can I tell of my joy and my fear to hear the call of my Lord